Hi, my name is Laura Camila Torres Beltran. I am in fifth semester of bachelor degree in foreign language with emphasis on English. My group number is 36. The day of today I will talk about IPA alphabet and its pronunciation. Let's go. IPA alphabet. In the IPA alphabet exists 44 different sounds. 12 are vowels, 8 are diphthongs, and 24 are consonants. The day of today focused me in the sound of the consonant and its pronunciation. The consonants are
The phoneme B. The phoneme B has bilabial articulation point. That is, it occurs at the junction of the two lips. A manner of articulation. It has an occlusive articulation mode. That is, there is a momentary total closure of the air passage. The pronunciation of this symbol is B. Example: bat, lap. Phoneme D. The phoneme D has alveolar articulation point, that is, the tongue comes into contact with the upper alveoli. It has an occlusive articulation mode, that is, it is produced a momentary total close of the air passage for then expelled away violently. The pronunciation of this phoneme is D. Example: dog, lady. Phoneme F. The phoneme F has labiodental articulation point, that is, it occurs when the lower lip touch the upper incision teeth. It has a fricative articulation mode, that is, the air passage skimming for the narrowness left by the lower lip and the upper teeth. The pronunciation of this phoneme is example: fine, fly. Phoneme G. The phoneme G has velar articulation. That is, it produces when the tongue touches the veil or velar zone. It has an occlusive articulation mode. That is, there is a momentary total close of the air passage for the spelling way violently. The pronunciation of this phoneme is G. Example: give, flock. Phoneme H. The phoneme H has glottal articulation point, that is, it is produced in the glottis or anterior part of the larynx. It has a fricative articulation mode, that is, the air passage skimming for the narrowness led by the lower lip and the upper teeth. The pronunciation of this phoneme is H. Example: how, hello. Phoneme J. The phoneme J has palatal articulation point, that is, it is produced when contacting the tongue with the palate. Manner it has an approximate articulation mode, that is, it is produced bringing mutually two articulating organs closer, although unlike the fricatives, without obstructing the air current, which exists through a single central point. The pronunciation of this phoneme is J. Example: yes, yellow. Phoneme K. The phoneme K has velar articulation point, that is, it is produced when the tongue touches the veil or velar zone. It has an orthostatic articulation mode, that is, there is a momentary total closure of the R passage for the spelled Y violently. The pronunciation of this phoneme is K. Example: cat, back. Phoneme L. Place article. The phoneme L has alveolar articulation point, that is, the tongue comes into contact with the upper alveoli. It has a lateral articulation mode, that is, the R passes brushing the sides of the oral cavity. The pronunciation of this phoneme is L. Example: leg, little. Phoneme M. The phoneme M has bilabial articulation point, that is, it occurs at the junction of the two lips. A manner of articulation. It has a nasal articulation mode, that is, the soft palatal remains lower without obstructing the nasal cavity, so that the air comes out of the mouth and nose at the same time. The pronunciation of this one is mm. Example: man, lemon. Phoneme M. The phoneme M has bilabial articulation point, that is, it occurs at the junction of the two lips. A manner of articulation. It has a nasal articulation mode, that is, the soft palatal remains lower without obstructing the nasal cavity, so that the air comes out of the mouth and nose at the same time. The pronunciation of this one is mm. Example: man, lemon. Phoneme This phoneme has velar articulation point, that is, it is produced when the tongue touches the veil or velar zone. It has a nasal articulation mode, that is, a part of it passes through the mouth, but another part does it through the nasal cavity. The pronunciation of the phoneme is example: sing, finger. Phoneme P. The phoneme P has bilabial articulation point, that is, it occurs at the junction of the two lips. It has an orthostatic articulation mode, that is, there is a momentary total close of the air passage. The pronunciation of this phoneme is P. Example: pet, map. Phoneme R. The phoneme R has a velar articulation point, that is, the tongue comes into contact with the upper alveoli. It has a vibral articulation mode, that is, the R makes the tip of the tongue vibrate colliding with the alveoli. The pronunciation of this phoneme is R. R. Example: red, try. Phoneme S. The phoneme S has a alveolar articulation point, that is, the tongue comes into contact with the upper alveoli. It has a fricative articulation mode, that is, the R passes skimming for the narrowness produced by the tongue and teeth. The pronunciation of this phoneme is S. Example: sun, six. Phoneme sh. This phoneme has post-alveolar articulation point, that is, the tongue will touch the back of the alveoli near the palate. It has a fricative articulation mode, that is, the air passage scheming for the neurones produced by the tongue and teeth. The pronunciation of this phoneme is sh. Example: chi, crash. Phoneme T. The phoneme T has alveolar articulation point, that is, the tongue comes into contact with the upper alveoli. Manner of articulation. It has an occlusive articulation mode, that is, there is a momentary total closure of the air passage. The pronunciation of this phoneme is T. Example: ticket, time. Phoneme Ch. The phoneme Ch has post-alveolar articulation point, that is, the tongue will touch the back of the alveoli near the palate. It has an affricative articulation mode, that is, are formed by the composition of an occlusive and its corresponding fricative. The pronunciation of this phoneme is ch. Example: check, charge. Phoneme this phoneme has dental articulation point, that is, the tip of the tongue is between both rows of teeth. It has a fricative articulation mode, that is, the air passage scheming for the narrowness caused by the tongue and teeth. The pronunciation of this phoneme is example: think, put. Phoneme z. This phoneme has dental articulation point, that is, the tip of the tongue is between both rows of teeth. It has a fricative articulation mode, that is, the air passage scheming for the narrowness produced by the tongue and teeth. The pronunciation of this phoneme is z. Example: this, mother. Phoneme B. The phoneme B has labiodental articulation point, that is, it occurs when the lower lip touches the upper incisor lip. It has a fricative articulation mode, that is, the ear pass scheme for the narrowness left by the lower lip and the upper lip. The pronunciation of this phoneme is example: voice, 5. Phone W. The phone W has bilabial articulation point, that is, it occurs in the junction of the two lips. It has an approximate articulation mode, that is, it is produced bringing mutual to articulatory organs close. Although, unlike the fricatives, without obstructing the air current, which exits through a single central point. The pronunciation of this phoneme is wa. Examples: with, window. Phoneme C. The phoneme C has alveolar articulation point, that is, the tongue comes into contact with the upper alveoli. It has a fricative articulation mode, that is, the air passage scheming for the narrowness produced by the tongue and teeth. The pronunciation of this phoneme is z. Example: so, lazy. Phoneme G. The phoneme G has post-alveolar articulation point, that is, the tongue touches the back of the alveoli near the palate. It has a fricative articulation mode, that is, the air passage scheming for the narrowness produced by the tongue and teeth. The pronunciation of this phoneme is G. Example: pleasure, Vision. Phoneme ch. The phoneme ch has post-alveolar articulation point, that is, the tongue will touch the back of the alveoli near the palate. It has an affricate articulation mode, that is, are formed by the composition of an occlusive and its corresponding fricative. The pronunciation of this phoneme is ch. Example: jazz, large.
Thank you very much.